and I will be beginning with the first chapter today, 10 Principles of Economics. In this chapter, we are basically going to understand some basic principles of this subject economics, which will help you further understand the economic theories that you deal with in different aspects of production and consumption. So it's important to first understand what is a very fundamental outline of this subject. So we are going to look at 10 of these principles, and all of them, each one of them are important. They're important for you to understand the further topics that you will be dealing with in this subject. Okay, so the first thing before we move on to the first principle is to understand what is really the meaning of the term economics. Now, economics, the origin of this word is a Greek word which is called as oikonomos. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but it is a Greek word which means that one who manages a household. So this term economics comes from a Greek word, the meaning of which is one who manages a household. You might think कि economics को हम household से क्यों compare कर रहे हैं? Yes, they are two different things, but if you look at the basic idea, the basic problems that one comes across in a household, they are quite similar to the kind of problems that we come across in an economy as a whole. So even within a household, if you look at your house and the kind of issues that you have in your house, wherein a household is a group of individuals wherein you have to decide which individual will do what work, how much food will be given to which individual, what are the kind of activities that a particular individual can perform in a given household. So, if supposedly there are 4 people in a household, then maybe one is looking at household activities, one is handling the entire house, one is looking at, is going out for work and maybe earning some income and then contributing to the household. Maybe one is involved in right now majorly involved in the consumption process. So maybe this is a kid in the household and right now he or she is only consuming the income that the two bread earners of the family are earning. So each of the member in a household have their own distinct kind of actions, distinct kind of activities that they perform, and there is obviously a give and take relationship across these individuals within a given household. Similarly, if you talk about an economy is not very different from how a household operates. Even in an economy, there are certain categorizations made to certain group of individuals. So there will be a group of individuals who are involved in the production setup. They are involved in the production of certain goods and commodities. There will be one category of people who will be involved in the consumption of goods and services produced by the producers. So even if you dissect production further, there are categories of people who will be producing say food products. Then there will be another category of people producing, say, garments, clothing items. There will be another category of people producing, say, machines. So each individual in an economy has a certain distinct role to play. How does an economy decide which individual will play what role is something that we are going to understand ultimately in this subject. So the point here is to understand that economics or economy as a whole is not very different from how a household operates. The kind of decisions that one has to make in a household are similar to the kind of decisions that people face in an economy. And that is the relationship between the meaning of this term with the term economics. Now, one very, very common insight that you need to have regarding the economy as a whole is the problem of scarcity. Economics is nothing but it is the study of how a society manages its scarce resources. Matlab, that there is always a problem of scarcity of resources. Whether you talk about a household or you talk about an economy, there will always be a problem of scarcity of resources, which is that we do not have unlimited resources. Suppose there is a kid in a household who wants to go to a gaming zone and he wants to be there for 24 hours for the entire day. Is it possible? No. Why? Because maybe the household has a limited set of income that they can spend on this activity of the kid. So there is always a problem of scarcity, which is कि हमेशा हमारे पास अपनी अनलिमिटेड वांट्स को फुलफिल करने के लिए रिसोर्सेज अवेलेबल नहीं होते हैं. So we have unlimited wants as individuals, as an economy, as a household, but we have limited resources. So in the presence of these limited resources, जब हमारे पास scarce resources हैं या limited resources हैं, in the presence of this problem, how do we attain the best possible outcome? What is the best possible solution or best possible outcome that we can achieve in the presence of limited resources such that our wants are satisfied? That is exactly what economics teaches you. Economics will tell you how a society manages its scarce resources. If suppose there are no restrictions on the availability of resources in a given economy, then the economy would want to grow as much as possible. When a particular economy is the richest economy in the world, it will not stop growing. So the wants of an economy are also unlimited. Even when it becomes the richest economy, it would still want to grow more. As an economy, there are certain restrictions. Maybe आप सारी चीजें produce नहीं कर सकते हो. Maybe you don't have the technology. Maybe you don't have the manpower कि आप इतना goods and services produce कर पाओ कि आप और ज़्यादा grow कर सको या आप unlimited level पे grow कर सको. So what is the best possible point that an economy can reach, provided the resources that an economy has is the science of economics, is the study of economics. So economics basically tries to understand how people make decisions. To be able to achieve the best possible outcome, how do people make decisions? How do people interact with each other? So in a given market, if we talk about the producers and the sellers, how do people interact with each other and what are the effects of these interactions on the economy? So these are some things that the subject tries to understand. So the next four principles are going to tell us how do people make decisions. I just told you that one of the aspects of economics is to understand how people make decisions. When you think of yourself, imagine yourself making a certain decision, then what are the things that you keep in mind when you take a decision? And the first principle is that people face trade-offs, meaning that whatever you are doing right now or in life generally, there is always something that you are losing. So there is always a trade-off that one has to face. For example, suppose there is a student who, after completing the school, decides to go to a college, which you are in college, and let's say you have certain subjects to handle at the same time. So say you have economics, you have psychology, you have English, and maybe you have maths. Now, a student has a certain fixed number of hours in a day that he wants to dedicate to studying, let's say 4 hours in a day. Now here the student has to decide how he is going to allocate these 4 hours to the following subjects that he has to cover in a given day. How would this student face a trade-off? Is because whenever this student is studying a certain subject, let's say the student is studying economics for 2 hours, then he is always facing a trade-off, meaning that in these 2 hours he is only focusing on one subject, that is economics, whereas in these 2 hours while he is doing economics, while he is reading economics, he is losing out on the other 3 subjects. Trade-off का मतलब यही है that you are giving up something in return for something. So when you choose to do something, then you are at the same time losing something. Also, you can understand this in terms of, say, student also enjoys watching TV. So again, there is a trade-off that when he is studying, he is losing out on watching TV. He is again facing a trade-off. So when you get something by studying, he or she is going to be better at a particular subject. He is definitely gaining something, but at the same time, he or she is also losing something, which could be everything possible that could have been done in these 2 hours when he is focusing on studying economics. You think of anything around yourself, you can always think of at least one possible trade-off that you are doing when you are involved in a certain action or a certain activity. So people are always facing trade-offs. A household deciding how they are going to spend their income. Suppose a household gets a certain amount of income monthly, let's say hypothetically 100 rupees. Then this household has to decide how much of this income has to go on consumption, how much of this income has to go on travel, how much of this income has to go into savings. So again, while making this decision, the household is facing a trade-off. If the household puts 50 rupees to consumption, then the household is losing these 50 rupees for travel and savings. While you are putting some money for a specific action such as consumption, you are taking this money from the two other actions, two other activities which are possible. Think of anything at any level, at an individual level, at a household level, or at an economy level, you will always realize that people are constantly making trade-offs. Another kind of trade-off. So if you talk about at an economy level, what are the kind of trade-offs? An economy is always broadly facing a trade-off between guns and butter. This is a common term that is used, which means that if an economy has a certain amount of GDP, it's nothing but the income, it's comparable to the income at household level, and the economy has to decide कि हम इसमें से कितना part national defense पे spend करें, which is what guns is referring to, and how much of this has to be spent on consumption, that is on goods and services, so that people have more food to consume, people have more goods to purchase, and that sort of in return raises the standard of living of the people in this economy. National defense, on the other hand, is to protect the borders of the economy. Again, there has to be some expenditure that has to go on this aspect as well. But an economy is again facing a trade-off. If the economy spends more on national defense, then the economy is spending less on consumption. If the economy spends more on consumption, then the economy is spending less on national defense. So there is again a trade-off that an economy is facing. Another kind of trade-off that you can think of is at a firm level or at a company, factory level, production level. That is, say, producing something, some good. Let's say this is some chemical factory, and it's producing some chemicals. At the same time, it is also creating pollution. Obviously, if the firms produce more chemicals, it is going to sell more chemicals in the market and earn a higher level of profit. So more production is going to yield higher level of income or higher level of profit for the firm. But at the same time, while producing these chemicals, the firm is also creating a huge amount of pollution, and that is leading to a problem of clean environment. So there is again a trade-off. The trade-off is now between higher level of income for the firm and clean environment for the nation as a whole. So again, there is a trade-off. Now the firm has to decide. The problem is that what is the exact amount of chemicals that the firm would produce such that there is a balance between both these things? What is the exact number of hours that a student would allocate to studying a particular subject such that he or she strikes a balance between all of the activities that he wants to do? What is the amount of income that the household decides to put into consumption such that the household is happy with the amount they are putting into consumption, travel and savings? Again, even at the economy level, what is the amount of GDP that the economy wants to put to national defense or to consumption goods and services, such that you get the maximum returns? So the idea is that whenever anyone at any level makes a decision, there is always a trade-off. Another very common trade-off that is usually witnessed is between efficiency and equity, and this is something that a society faces at an economy level, which is efficiency का मतलब होता है that the society is getting the most from its scarce resources. Equity का मतलब होता है that these resources are distributed uniformly. They are distributed uniformly across different individuals in the society. Now there is often a trade-off between efficiency and equity. Let's say this is the amount of resources that an economy has. Efficiency का मतलब है that you are increasing the size of these resources. You are increasing the amount of resources that you have. And equity का मतलब है that you are talking about the equal distribution of resources to each individual in the economy. Yeah, and I'm saying that there is often a trade off, meaning that if you try to reach a society which is more equal, then there will always be inefficiencies. You will always have to compromise on the size of the resources that you have. Both of these goals for an economy are important. अगर आप imagine करो कि आप एक economy के head हो और आपको डिसाइड करना है कि आपकी इकोनॉमी ज्यादा बड़ी हो, ज्यादा एफिशिएंट हो, ज्यादा से ज्यादा रिसोर्सेज हो, या आपकी इकोनॉमी में इक्विटी हो, एवरीबडी हैज इक्वल शेयर ऑफ गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज. So it is obviously very confusing for you to decide that what exactly do you want. But there is always a fact that if you try to achieve more of one thing, if you try to achieve more of efficiency, then there will always be a trade off in the equity. मतलब अगर आपकी society, if you aim for a richer society, if you aim for an economy with more amount of resources, then you will always have to sacrifice the equality aspect. There is a trade off between these two. So for example, if we talk about a certain policy called as unemployment insurance, globally across the world there are certain countries who प्रोवाइड अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट इंश्योरेंस, जिसका मतलब होता है दैट सपोज कोई एक इंडिविजुअल है इकोनॉमी में जो अनएम्प्लॉयड है, डजंट हैव अ जॉब, द गवर्नमेंट मेक श्योर्स दैट द अनएम्प्लॉयड पर्सन gets some amount of insurance, some amount of income, some amount of aid from the government side. Now ये एक पॉलिसी है जो इक्विटी एस्पेक्ट को टैकल कर रही है. इसलिए टैकल कर रही है बिकॉज द पॉलिसी मेकर्स इन दिस इकोनॉमी वांट कि जितने भी इंडिविजुअल्स हैं इस इकोनॉमी में, दे आर एबल टू एक्सेस equal amount of goods and services. So जो लोग employed हैं, they are definitely getting some income from the companies that they are employed in, and people who are unemployed are getting some income from the government. So there is no distinction between the ones who are unemployed and the ones who are employed by introducing this policy. अगर government कुछ इस तरीके की policy introduce करते हैं, then the difference between these two categories of people will reduce. Obviously जरूरी नहीं है कि they will come on the same platform, because there could obviously be difference in the amount of money that the government is providing and the amount of money that the employed people are getting from their sources. But the policy tries to reduce the gap between these two categories of individuals. Now what this does is that it definitely makes the economy more equal. By providing unemployment insurance, the economy is becoming more equal, but it is at the same time becoming less efficient by disturbing the incentives of the people who are employed. Now people who are employed will feel that we are working really hard to get the money that we are getting. We are spending say 7 hours a day in our office, attending meetings, and working on the laptops. We are doing every possible thing to get this amount of money, but people who are unemployed, they are enjoying the luxury of their they're sitting at their houses, they're all comfortable, and they're still getting some money from the government, so they might feel disincentivized to work. The people who are employed might feel disincentivized to work, and that might increase unemployment in the economy. So people who are employed will now say that there's no point working, because anyway, even if we are unemployed, the government is going to give us some income which may be less than the income that we are currently earning, but at least we are going to get more leisure. We are going to sit at home, we don't have to work hard, we don't have to scratch our brains, and so we are going to live a very comfortable life. So even they might decide to not work, and as a result of this, it might create more unemployment in the economy. And because if more people are unemployed, then that's obviously going to decrease the efficiencies in the economy, because there will be lesser production of goods and services, because now we have more number of people who are unemployed. So agar production kam hoga, then obviously that will impact the income of the nation and will reduce the efficiencies. So although this policy seemed like a good policy because it was trying to create more equality in the economy, but it at the same time is also reducing the efficiency. Now this doesn't mean that ये पॉलिसी एकदम गलत है और इस तरीके की पॉलिसीज इंट्रोड्यूस ही नहीं होनी चाहिए, बिकॉज इफ यू टॉक अबाउट एन इकोनॉमी विच इज अ सोशल इकोनॉमी, whenever a policy maker or a government decides to introduce a policy, there is always a social intention. So it doesn't mean that such kind of policies should not be introduced, but the balance between the two has to be understood. One economic fact that has to be understood is that whenever you are introducing such policies, there will always be the negative effects of these policies in the kind of trade off it is introducing. So, realizing the fact that people face trade offs does not tell us that how do people make decision or how should people make decision. अभी तक हमने सिर्फ ये बात करी है that this is true that people face trade-offs. So this is the first principle. Now the next principle is related to the first principle, and the second principle says that cost of something is what you give up to get it. Suppose I talk about what is the cost of going to college. Cost of going to college could include tuition fees, could include the expenditure that you do on food or your accommodation. Another thing that you could add to this list is transportation, commuting from college to hostel, hostel to college, or from your house to college and back to your home. This could comprise the entire cost of college. So one very important thing that we often miss out when we try to evaluate the cost of something, as a layman we often miss out on the things that we are giving up to get a certain thing, and that's actually a very important cost of anything that you're doing. So if you are not an economist and if you do not understand this concept of the actual cost, this is also called as the opportunity cost. If you do not know this concept of opportunity cost, then you will always commit this error by only looking at the direct cost of a certain thing. So if I talk about the cost of college, then definitely these are all legitimate answers, these are all correct answers. But one very important thing that you are missing out is the cost of your time. Obviously when you are going to college, you are dedicating 3 years or 4 years of your life to college. Obviously this is, I'm not saying that you're wasting your time, you're definitely putting your time to the best use because you have already done your own cost benefit analysis. So whenever people face trade-offs, when they make decisions, they usually conduct a cost benefit analysis in their head. And what is this cost benefit analysis? You need to compare the benefits of doing something with the cost of doing something. So if I decide to go to the college, then I have to look at both the benefits of going to college and the cost of going to college. Now, to make a wise decision, you need to understand benefits and costs of anything very clearly, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about in the second principle. We are saying that when we make a cost benefit analysis, whenever we feel that the benefit of a particular action or a particular good is more than its cost, then we often choose to purchase that good or we choose to perform that action. Right now we're talking about going to college. So if ultimately I come up with a decision that yes, going to college is beneficial, benefits that I'm going to get by going to college is going to be more, is going to be greater than the cost that I'm incurring, then I will decide that I want to go to college. But to be able to make a good decision, you need to be very clear with what is really the cost that you are including in your list, and find that you will include all the direct cost attached with a particular action, right now going to college. You should also incorporate these indirect costs, which are called as the opportunity cost. Opportunity cost includes the cost of an item or an activity or an action that you are giving up to get something. What is something that you are giving up to go to college? Is your time. Now in this time, what are the alternatives that you could have pursued? If you wouldn't have gone to college, what are the other possible alternatives that you would have had? Provided you've completed your school, you could have got some job. So in these 3 years or 4 years of your life that you're dedicating to college, you are also losing out on a job, which could be your alternative. You could obviously have different alternatives. Let's say this is one alternative that you would have had. Instead of going to college, you would have taken up a job and started working there. So definitely while working, you would have earned something. So in these 3 years, you would have earned some money. That is also an indirect cost of going to college, which we often miss out when we talk about any kind of cost. So there is a difference between the concept of accounting cost, that when you talk about accounting cost, you would only include these kinds of cost, the direct kind of cost, that cost of going to college is the money that I'm paying, the fees that I'm paying, the books, the expenditure that I'm making on books. I might have to get new clothes to go to college, I might have to spend on my hostel, transportation, etc., etc. So these are all accounting cost which any layman person would understand. But as economists, whenever we are making any decisions, we always consider the economic cost, which includes opportunity cost. When you make a decision that, okay, going to college is much more beneficial than the cost that I'm incurring, if after considering all these costs, including the opportunity cost, if your decision is still saying that the benefits are more than the cost, then you make that decision. That is the second principle of economics, that whenever you are making a cost benefit analysis, you need to consider the total cost, including the opportunity cost. And obviously, it is true that the benefit of going to college is greater than the cost, even when you include the opportunity cost, because possibly the job that you will get after completing your school may not be as great a job as compared to the job that you might get in future after completing your college. So definitely, if you look at the benefits, then obviously you will also have to incorporate all the possible benefits that you expect to get by investing your time in college. So you will take into account the kind of knowledge that you get, you will take into account the future job that you might get after completing your college degree. So after making a true sense of the total benefits and the total cost, if finally you come to a conclusion that your benefits are more than the cost, then you take up the decision to go to the college. And that is how economists would operate. This is the second principle of economics, that whenever we try and look at the cost of something in economics, we should incorporate the concept of opportunity cost. And one important thing to be kept in mind is that this decision may be different for different individuals. Somebody who say is an athlete, maybe this student is earning a lot of money by investing his or her time into sports, or she tries to compare the benefits with the cost. Even when the athlete incorporates the concept of opportunity cost, then maybe the costs are greater than the benefits, because the opportunity cost of going to college, doing a full time college degree for an athlete, may be a very huge number, because maybe he's earning a lot by investing his time into sports. So maybe for him the decision would be different, because he doesn't really think that doing a 3-year college degree would add anything, would add a lot to the kind of profession he's involved in. It isn't a universal decision when we compare the benefits and cost for anything. Right now we're taking college into consideration, but it could be anything. It could be purchasing a good, it could be conducting some other action, conducting some other activity. The decisions could differ for different people. The third principle that we are going to discuss is that rational people think at margin. Now in economics, since we have already discussed in the beginning that it is a science of decision making, हम जब economics को समझते हैं तो we also say that economics हमें ये समझाती है कि लोग decisions कैसे बनाते हैं. उन decisions को बनाने के लिए हमने कुछ चीजों की बात already करी है, that while making a decision, people face a trade-off. Whenever you are making a decision, there is always something that you're losing, and that is the cost of taking up a particular decision. Third thing that we are adding on to this science of decision making is that rational people will always think at the margin. Now it's important to focus on two words here. First, rational people, and second, at the margin. Now let's first understand, what do we understand by rational people? Rational people are the kind of people who want to do the best they can to achieve their objectives. That is, they want to take the best decision to achieve their objectives. And we are saying that if there is a person who is a rational person, who is wanting to make the best decision such that he or she can attain their objective, then we are saying that they will always think at the margin. Now, what do we mean by this margin is that हम हमेशा जब भी कोई decision बनाते हैं, believing that all of us are rational beings, we always think कि एक एक्स्ट्रा करने से क्या हो. Like whenever you are having food, you don't think that today I am going to have 6 plates of dal makhni and chawal or dal makhni and chapati. When your tummy is filling up, then you think that should I have an extra bite? Should I have an extra spoon of a certain food product? So whenever you make a certain decision, you are always thinking about one extra thing. And that's exactly what's called as thinking at the margin. Suppose you have, a certain amount of money with you. A lot of times your decision would surround around that whether I should spend this much extra. What is the cost of spending extra on a certain product, on a certain thing? So a lot of times we compare the marginal benefit with the marginal cost. हम अगर रैशनल हैं तो हम टोटल बेनिफिट को टोटल कॉस्ट से कंपेयर करने की जगह मार्जिनल बेनिफिट को मार्जिनल कॉस्ट से कंपेयर करते हैं. इट ऑल्सो मीन्स दैट यू आर थिंकिंग एट द एज. मतलब आप हमेशा कोई एक एक्स्ट्रा चीज के बारे में बात कर रहे हो ना. मार्जिनल बेनिफिट और मार्जिनल कॉस्ट का मतलब है कि अगर आप 10 ग्लासेस ऑफ वाटर कंज्यूम कर चुके हो तो एक एक्स्ट्रा 11th ग्लास आपको क्या बेनिफिट प्रोवाइड कर रहा है. इफ यू आर थर्स्टी, आपको बहुत प्यास लग रही है एंड यू हैव ऑलरेडी कंज्यूम्ड 10 glasses of water, then what is that extra 11th glass of water providing you? What is the benefit it is providing you? That is called as marginal benefit. You're not talking about कि मेरे को टोटल कितना फायदा हुआ है by consuming 11 glasses of water. No, you're talking about an extra consumption, and that's called as the marginal consumption. What is the benefit that you are getting out of this extra consumption? Similarly, अगर आप cost की बात करो तो what is the cost of this extra 11th glass of water is what you will keep in mind while making a decision whether you want to consume the 11th glass of water or not. If you feel that your objective is to satisfy your thirst, you want to get rid of that, then you will compare your marginal benefit with the marginal cost. And this comparison of marginal benefit with marginal cost works for almost every decision, not just the economic decisions that you make in life, but almost every decision that you make in life. For example, let's now look at an economics kind of a decision. Suppose there is an airline which is running a flight, and there are, say, 200 seats across a certain plane, and say the entire expenditure or the entire cost of running the plane is 10,000 rupees. Obviously, it wouldn't be this small a number, but I'm just taking a hypothetical number here. So let's say the cost of running a 200-seater plane is 10,000 rupees. So I can calculate the average cost of each seat. Suppose I am running this company and I want to price the ticket of each seat. I want to understand कि मैं कितने price पे हर seat को offer करूं such that I am able to run my company. So my total cost comes out to be 10,000 hypothetically, and then my average cost, अगर 200 seats हैं, then my average cost is about 50 rupees per seat. It should mean that as a company, if I don't want to get into losses, then I should never sell a ticket less than 50 rupees per seat. That should never happen. But is that really true? No. Why not? Because if I am a rational person running this company, then in certain circumstances, I might sell a ticket at less than 50 rupees per seat. And this is something that you will also notice in reality. Sometimes if booked a ticket yourself, it could be a railway ticket, a train ticket, or a bus ticket, or a flight ticket. This works for almost every transport medium. You will notice कि जब आप कभी भी end moment पे ticket book करते हो, like if there is an availability of seats, suppose a plane is having 200 seats, or suppose जिस दिन इस plane को travel करना है, when this has to fly, there are only 100 seats which are booked. So 100 seats are lying vacant. So at this point, what will the airline think? The airline will think at the margin, and at the margin would mean that anyway, if the plane flies, then these 100 seats are going vacant. Yeah, if you wait for a person to arrive and pay 50 rupees per seat, then it's possible that you might just fly without anyone taking these 100 seats. But suppose there is a person who says that I am willing to pay 30 rupees per seat and I want to fly on this plane, then do you think the airline would sell the ticket at 30 rupees, provided that the average cost is 50, which is greater than 30? Anyway, if the plane runs without selling the ticket to this person, there's not going to be an extra money that the plane earns by लीविंग दीज 100 सीट्स वेकेंट। ये 100 सीट्स खाली छोड़ के जितना कॉस्ट है इस प्लेन को रन करने का, उतना कॉस्ट उनको फिर भी बेयर करना पड़ेगा। सो व्हेन दे टेक दिस पर्सन इन, देन व्हाट दे आर कंपेयरिंग इज द मार्जिनल बेनिफिट विद मार्जिनल कॉस्ट। मार्जिनल कॉस्ट है कि इस एक्स्ट्रा पर्सन को प्लेन में लेने का हमारा एक्स्ट्रा क्या खर्चा हो रहा है, व्हाट इज द एक्स्ट्रा कॉस्ट दैट यू आर bearing to have this person in your plane, which is nothing, which is negligible. How much do you think would a plane have to incur to have one more person extra in the plane? Not much. जो भी plane का fixed cost है, this 10,000 may not be on an individual basis. This might include the fixed cost that the plane will have to pay, even if the plane is flying with only 10 passengers. Even if there are only 10 passengers on the plane, they will still have to incur a fixed amount of money. They'll have to put in that money as their cost, because that is the bare minimum that they need to run a plane. And then obviously per seat या per person के basis पे भी cost बढ़ेगा. But this entire cost does not include that variability. So the marginal cost of having one more extra person in the plane will be very negligible. But the marginal benefit is how much? 30 per seat. This person is ready to pay 30. So even if this 30 is less than 50, which is the average cost of each seat, if there is some rational person who is behind the company, then that will lead him to make a decision that yes, we want to sell this ticket to this person because the marginal benefit is greater than the marginal cost. And that's exactly what we mean by saying that people think at the margin. Now moving to the fourth principle, which is people respond to incentives. Incentives are some things that are offered which induces a person to act. अगर आप एक जॉब में हो और आपको आपके एम्प्लॉयर ने आपको ऑफर करा है दैट इफ यू कंप्लीट दिस टास्क, एनी टास्क, वट एवर द जॉब रिक्वायर्स यू टू कंप्लीट, I will pay you this much extra from your basic salary in this month. Yeah, you know that there are sometimes achievement incentives या bonus incentives जो कि companies offer करती हैं. And what is the rationale of offering these incentives? The rationale is that people are working more. By offering these incentives, they are changing the behavior of the individual by inducing him to act in a certain manner. If the employer wants his employees to work more, he will be offering them incentives. If a college wants the students to learn in a better way, they want their students to be bright, they might offer students some incentives like scholarship incentives. You would notice that a lot of universities give scholarships to the bright students, to the students who have the highest score or who have overachieved in a certain subject. They get some incentives. And why are these incentives offered? Because they want a certain kind of behavior from a certain person. And you sometimes do this informally amongst yourselves also, ki sometimes you bribe your friends that if you do this, I will give you this, or I will do this for you. These are all examples of incentives. We all get ourselves into offering incentives or receiving incentives in day-to-day lives. And the reason why incentives are offered are because they definitely push you to behave in a certain manner. Now people respond to incentives. If we look at this property, if we look at this principle and try and understand how this can really change economics, you will understand this through an example. So a lot of policies, अगर हम economics में बात करें कि economy कैसे run करती है, there are certain government policies. Now if policy makers understand that incentives are so deeply situated in human behavior, and those policies actually implicitly कोई incentive create करती हैं. Now it is important कि अगर उस incentive को ध्यान में रखा गया है, जब भी कोई policy introduce हुई है और इस बात को ध्यान में रखा गया है कि ये policy किस तरीके के incentives create करेगी, तो ये बात को ध्यान रखना जरूरी है कि क्या वो incentives सही direction में create हो रहे हैं या गलत direction में create हो रहे हैं. क्योंकि कई बार ऐसी पॉलिसीज इंट्रोड्यूस करी जाती हैं जिसका टारगेट होता है कुछ अचीव करना, लेकिन बिकॉज उस पॉलिसी की वजह से इंसेंटिव्स इस तरीके से वर्क करते हैं कि आप एकदम अपने टारगेट से ऑपोजिट डायरेक्शन में चले जाते हो. तो अगर ऐसी कोई चीज हो रही है, देन द पर्पस ऑफ द पॉलिसी इज कैंसल्ड, इज नेगेटेड. सो टू बी एबल टू रन द पॉलिसीज बेटर, it is important that you keep into mind that what are the incentives that this policy is going to create and how are people going to respond to such incentives. Now let me give you an example, you'll understand this better. Long back, in 1960s, there was a huge concern about auto safety. And right now, it's a very common practice that in a lot of cars, four-wheelers, you have a seat belt. You have a provision of a seat belt. But long back, 60 years back, there were cars which did not have this provision of a seat belt. People were, indulging into rash driving, fast driving. There were a lot of cases of accidents. So what the policymakers suggested, they suggested there was a concern about auto safety and they suggested that we should now have a provision of a seat belt so that there are lesser chances of accidents. Now, at first, it would seem that yes, this policy looks fine, there's no problem with it. Why? Because अगर seat belt होंगे गाड़ियों में, तो अगर the person wears a seat belt, then probability that person sitting inside the car will survive will actually rise, because if the person is wearing a seat belt and even if there is some unfortunate accident, then the chances that this person will survive will rise. And that's what the policymakers wanted. Policymakers wanted ki, because there are a lot of accidents happening, because of which there are a lot of casualties, a lot of deaths of people who are in the vehicles. So we should try to look at it. It was observed that this introduction of seat belt definitely decreased the number of people dying inside the car. Like people who are in the car, the probability that they were dying or they were getting injured decreased. Lekin then it also led to an increase in the injuries of people who were walking on the road. So the pedestrian injuries started increasing. And the reason why they started increasing was that it created an unintended behavior in the driving of people. इस पॉलिसी ने क्या करा? So policy disturbed the incentives. Now how did it disturb the incentives? Now people felt that now we are wearing a seat belt. So जो लोग car drive कर रहे थे, they felt that now we are safe because now we are wearing the seat belt. So even if there is any damage, even if there is any accident, then we will survive. We are fine with it. And that actually created an incentive in the drivers that led to fast driving. Rather than creating a behavior where people are more cautious, people became more careless. People were now carefree because they knew that we are wearing a seat belt and the seat belt will help us, will not create any damage to us. So they started driving fast and they were more carefree while driving, which led to accidents. But now the accidents created injuries to the people who were walking on the road rather than people who were driving. So again, that is also something that the policymakers wouldn't want. So the point that has to be understood here is that whenever we try to introduce any solution, जब भी हम कोई as policymakers at an economic level, whenever we are suggesting any kind of change, then we need to keep into mind all aspects of it. We need to understand कि एक particular policy किस तरीके से human incentives को change करेगी और वो incentives की वजह से उस इंडिविजुअल का किस तरीके से बिहेवियर चेंज होगा, जो भी उस चेंज इन बिहेवियर की वजह से जो सिचुएशन निकल कर आएगी, वेदर दैट इज फेवरेबल, वेदर दैट इज समथिंग यू वांट एज अ पॉलिसी मेकर और नॉट, हैज टू बी केप्ट इन माइंड बिफोर इंट्रोड्यूसिंग अ पॉलिसी. पॉलिसी को इंट्रोड्यूस करने से पहले ये चीजें दिमाग में रखनी है. इन सारे इंसेंटिव्स को अच्छे से स्टडी करके कोई पॉलिसी इंट्रोड्यूस करनी चाहिए, बिकॉज ऑफ दिस प्रिंसिपल दैट पीपल डू रिस्पॉन्ड टू इंसेंटिव्स. एंड इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट देयर आर नो अनइंटेंडेड कॉन्सिक्वेंसेज. मतलब आपने इंटेंड नहीं करा था. योर इंटेंशन वॉज टू प्रोवाइड सेफ्टी, योर इंटेंशन वॉज टू प्रमोट सेफ्टी. You wanted people to be more cautious when they are driving, but because you have introduced a provision जो उनको उनकी safety guarantee करता है, that led to unintended consequences. जो आप नहीं चाहते थे वो produce हो गया and that created another problem. So this policy, rather than promoting auto safety, it actually went against it. So it is important to understand the mechanism of incentives from all aspects before introducing any kind of policy.